never sleeps, pal.
Hey there, this is Pete Townsend from Norio Ventures, and this is episode 24 of Money Never Sleeps, a podcast that looks inside the head of entrepreneurs and at what makes them do what they do. Money Never Sleeps is kindly sponsored by Top Tier Recruitment, a specialist recruitment consultancy in fintech and financial services. In this episode, we talk to Shane Brett, founder and CEO of Gecko Governance. I've known Shane for well over 10 years, and it shows with this episode. Beyond what they're already doing for the wealth and asset management market, Gecko Governance are surfing the next wave of the financial markets, digital assets, and this wave is building quicker than most people realize. Listen in as Shane tells us all about it, with a bit of help from me as I was pulling double duty again with Owen called away. For all of Owen's fans out there, rest assured, he'll be back next week. Now, back to Shane, and on with the show. Here we go again. Welcome to the 24th episode of Money Never Sleeps. We're here in Start Lab on Camden Street in Dublin by Bank of Ireland. I'm Pete Townsend, and we're here with Shane Brett, founder of Gecko Governance. Welcome to the show, Shane.
Thank you, Pete. Great to be here.
Awesome. I was just thinking that you and I haven't seen each other in about at least 6 months.
That must be right, yeah.
Yeah. And very excited to have you on the show here today, just to hear about everything that's going on with you. Right. For the listeners, Shane and I go way back.
At least a decade.
2006. So I tell this story from time to time when I meet people who know you. I say that Shane Brett was the first one to resign after I started as head of operations at BNP Paribas back in 2006.
Right. That was in no way coincidental.
No. But I think that's a falsehood because I look back at your LinkedIn profile, and your time at BNP Paribas ended in February 2006.
It did, absolutely.
And I didn't start until like July of 2006.
Right, I see.
So I think we just kind of had some type of crossover at that point that allowed us to embellish and tell that story a bit.
Very good, yeah. So we didn't realize we were both doing it.
I know.
I was busy by then up in Dundalk setting up a funds office by the summer of 2006. So, God, it feels a while ago now.
Yeah, no, it's a long time ago. But, lots of water under the bridge since then. But you had, just looking back at your LinkedIn profile and seeing your career and where you got to at this point, before BNP Paribas, you had Standard Life, you had PNC.
Yep.
After BNP Paribas, you had Pioneer.
Yep.
You had Daiwa.
That's right.
And then you got into the RBS fund, a hedge fund business. We started doing due diligence.
That became Aberdeen. That's right.
Yep. And that was Colin Mooney, the guy who I used to work with in Bermuda.
Exactly.
That was part of that business. And then things kind of came full circle a little while later. Then you had the time in Infonic HedgeSphere.
That's right. And our paths crossed there. Yeah.
Jane, what's her name?
Jane Conway.
Jane Conway, absolutely. And then you wrote a book. You wrote a book on AIFMD, and I met you in the basement of the Central Bank of Ireland building when we were in a meeting together.
As part of the committee that was dealing with industry.
Exactly.
I remember that.
Exactly. Yeah. And everyone says that if you want to be a good consultant, you got to write a book, right?
Definitely. Don't tell me, show me. Yeah. So the main one was like the future of hedge funds. The other AFMD one was kind of more a collection of articles.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. So don't tell me, show me. If you want to try and get into somewhere in London, they want a demonstration of your knowledge and ability, not just that you're a good guy.
Yeah. And then you came back. You came back to BNP.
That's right.
When we were doing, I think it was Alpha that you were doing a project for.
That's exactly right.
With an acquisition that BNP was doing. And at the end of... See, I'm telling your backstory for you.
I'm loving this. This is so easy. Great.
And I'm going to let you take over in a second. And you got so frustrated during that project in terms of the program management of the project that was being run in Microsoft Excel. And that's all you really had as a tool.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
That you said, you know what? When you're done with that project, you're going to leave. You're going to go build a piece of program management kit, aren't you?
That's exactly what happened. So it was a 30 work stream project, as you know, and it just wasn't reportable, scalable, and manageable on spreadsheets, But we had to. That's all we had.
That's all we had. So we did it. And then I remember probably about 6 months after the end of the project, and you had been out figuring out how to build this thing. You showed it to me, and I started thinking of all these different uses. And that's when the business was it always Gecko Governance, or
No,
it was just
it
Gecko
was just Gecko,
before
exactly.
that?
It was just Gecko, and it was funny. The governance piece came from a conversation I had with Blackstone, of all people. They said, "Well, this is not regular." This was as we kind of evolved it, because it became from project management more into compliance project management. And I remember someone from Blackstone saying to me, "This is, it's a governance solution that we really need, and that's what you need to roll this into, to be flexible enough for different regulation and compliance."
That was Blackstone.
It was.
That got you thinking about this a bit differently.
It was exactly. And actually, that was on a WebEx we did from the old Bank of Ireland Centre at the corner of Trinity College at the end of Grafton Street.
Wow. And so 2014 was when you founded the business, and then shortly after that, you kind of pivoted a bit into the governance side, right?
Yeah, I'd say, and also as well as that, in trying to get your first clients onboarded, it was the funds world that I knew. It was that there I had the contacts, I knew the pain points were there, so it was a natural kind of a segue to evolve what we already had into from kind of governance.
How convenient is that?
Great.
You had all this stuff in your head about the funds industry, and you said, "I'm going to go solve my own pain point for program management." But then, it's going to naturally pivot back to the funds industry.
That's exactly what happened. Exactly.
Lucky you.
Yeah, it just worked.
It just seems like it was meant to happen.
Yeah, I probably could have saved myself a year if I had done that at the very beginning, to be honest.
That's awesome. So, tell me where you are now.
Great.
Right? You're 4 years into it.
Yes.
I know part of this story because I keep tabs on what you're up to, and we meet from time to time. But just for the listeners, just tell us where you're at now with Gecko Governance.
Brilliant. So that business has evolved. Say this year, really recently, we have just closed a second round of funding, and we have there'll be 14 people shortly on the team, most of which are based in Dundalk, where we have 2 offices just on the campus of Dundalk Institute of Technology. We have 2 people in New York and 4 now over in Sydney as well. So and we will be raising more money over the remainder of the year, probably going into January. We've about kind of 4 key kind of well-known kind of clients in terms of, and a bunch of smaller ones in terms of the actual product. But what's interesting for us is we probably have 3 lines to the business now. We have the original solution, which is of course around fund governance. We have a new solution that we built this year, which is around more crypto and security tokens and tokenization, that whole process around that. And we've actually launched a bit of an advisory business as well, a bit of consulting, simply because the guys who are raising money through our new crypto product hadn't got a clue about AML or risk management or any of the stuff that they needed to legitimize their business and get it investor ready. So there's kind of 3 pieces to that now, really.
Okay.
And it's been great because now that we've taken funding from both Cosmo last year, the VC company, and more recently an investment bank called Blockhouse in Switzerland and New Zealand, it's enabled us to start hiring people with 10 years experience from big institutions, whereas before that we were taking in mainly people from DKIT on placement programs, and I'd be training them up and bringing them in, and getting them familiar with the funds industry over time.
You got some pretty good folks that way, though, didn't you?
Brilliant, really, really good folks. Oh my God, I mean, and such enthusiasm and knowledge. When I compare myself when I was 23 in terms of conscientious, oh my God, it's just so different now, you know. And it's about finding that right core people that 2 and 2 equals 25, and that will share that journey and vision with you in terms of growing a business, on a global basis,
Okay. I remember a lunch that we had would have been
I can tell you exactly when it was, because that was an important lunch for me.
Part of the way through 2016.
It was in September 2016.
In the schoolhouse.
I keep a diary.
Do you?
Yeah.
And I remember we were sitting there, and I always love having lunch with you, Shane, because it's like we could finish each other's sentences, right?
It's so true, yeah.
And that, one of us starts telling a story about something, and then it's just the other one shifts it into something not completely on a tangent. It just builds on it, and it builds on it, and it builds on it. We get and at one point I started talking about blockchain.
Yeah.
And you're like, what's blockchain?
And I hadn't realized the penny hadn't dropped in terms of its significance for what for the funds world, and also compared to what we were doing. So that was a seminal moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think I heard from you about 2 or 3 months later.
Yeah.
Or no, actually, I think it was 2 or 3 days later. And you said, Pete, thank you so much. I've spent all weekend looking into this.
Yeah, we had, and I got the rest of the team to do it as well. And that was for us in the compliance and funds world, to be able to use a blockchain data, to be able to use that timestamp of a list of transactions or an audit trail, so that you could stand over your work to a regulator or an investor and say, here's the process we followed, and here's the proof, irrefutably, that we've done it correctly or not.
Yeah.
And that was the major penny dropping moment. So you're on my Christmas card list forever.
Yeah, no, thanks, Shane. I can't wait. Now, the move that you've made now into the crypto space,
Yes.
right, makes a heck of a lot of sense to me, and I'll tell you why. Because with where ICOs are right now,
Yeah.
there's a lot of good ones out there, but the fair majority over time, over the last couple of years, I think it's more than 80% have failed or turned out to be frauds.
Completely.
So how do you start bringing some self-policing to that market,
Yeah.
right, and bring the standards up? And you know this story around the Managed Funds Association in the U.S. in 2007. They released a set of kind of best practices for hedge fund managers, right? Almost a code of honor. And it was, you had to sign up to it. And you could sign up to these standards, great. But if you read the first instance of the Alternative Investment Fund Managers Directive we've been talking about, AIFMD, which for listeners that aren't aware is kind of the first element of regulation on hedge fund managers. If you read the first instance of AIFMD in 2012, you can see references back to the Managed Funds Association hedge fund practices in 2007, right?
Exactly.
And I think what we're going to see when we have some regulatory, call it certainty, some guidance, clarity, exactly, around digital assets. I'm going to take it
in the wider
beyond
sense. Completely agree,
but just digital assets and what they are and how they should work, what the definitions are. That we're going to see some references back to those that were providing some of that self-policing. So there's a number of standards efforts out there right now. I know that you guys have launched the Irish crypto.
Yeah, so it's probably in beta at the moment. I will get it launched properly before the end of the year. So that was feeding on from an international group that we sponsored called the Gecko Governance Foundation. So that's a very interesting white paper with about 40 kind of key controls and checks for what these guys believe a good token offering should have. And that's we've taken that and pulled it into our solution for countries where rules don't exist, like Ireland and the US properly. So our thinking behind it was there's a lot of very good blockchain initiatives here in Ireland, but on the crypto piece specifically, as nearly like an asset class, there was no local kind of governance association to try and put in, best practice rules around that, or maybe to have a dialogue with the central bank and their new innovation hub and how that might feed into future kind of governance in that area.
You were just there this morning at the central bank, their innovation hub.
I was indeed. I was there for the launch event, which was great. It was really informative, and we're very lucky that it's such an open door. And Scott, the guys who runs that, is really keen to hear from the industry. And we'll be going back in to see them again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I saw Denise Delaney on Thursday night. Enterprise Ireland had an event on called the FinTech CEO Forum. Denise was there. Scott was there from the central bank. And it was just marvelous hearing Denise up on stage saying that Ireland punches above its weight.
Definitely.
When it comes to fintech, when it comes to innovation, and that with the Central Bank of Ireland's mandate being non-competitive, just hearing a statement like that from her was awesome.
It's really positive, exactly.
So hopefully we'll get her on the show coming up soon.
You definitely should. And just I was going to reference just your point around the crypto piece in particular.
Yeah.
So it was about a year ago, one of those other aha moments besides our blockchain lunch, when basically it was driven largely by our VC company in Boston, who were launching crypto products and looking to invest in that space.
I was going to ask you this.
They said, look, we've a pool of investors who come into our funds, and they want to know how we're going to manage their money from a compliance perspective. What solution are we going to use to provide them with reporting and updates? And Excel won't really cut it. It's not specific enough. So they said, look, you have 70% of what's needed for this new digital assets in the widest sense in your existing solution, and you could easily build all that out with some concentration on new resources and some analysis. So we went through our own licensing process in the Isle of Man, which was really kind of insightful because we had to go in front of a regulator and pitch all this to them and get approved. And it meant that when we came to putting through the first of 4 clients through our new solution, that we understood what good governance should look like, and to build something which could also pull in this whole new area around tokenization of funds. Whereby me and you could put in 10 grand into a VC fund or into a shopping centre. Did you know what I mean? We think that's going to be a really big growth area in the future. And our view, I suppose, is that the regulators, as they will regulate this area over the next year or 18 months. What they know is the banking and the funds world, and that as an asset class, the regulation, just like your reference from 2007 from the Managed Funds Association, we will see echoes of that in this new regulatory piece in the future.
You absolutely will.
So that kind of requirement around, if you're going to raise money, to have like an auditor or some sort of independent administrator. And certainly we've been talking to Malta around that, and their registered investor fund model, what they have over there, it's already if you want to invest in crypto with that money, it's already requiring, if it's retail, you have to have all the bells and whistles we have here in Dublin, the custodian, the administrator, the depository. So I think that'll be the natural next step for the industry.
Absolutely. It reminded me of something that I did over the weekend. I was flipping through one of those community newspapers, and there was an ad for a fair that was going on at RDS over the weekend, one of the big exhibition spaces here in Dublin. And it was called the Coin and Token Forum. And it was, before you get too excited, you didn't miss a conference, Shane.
No way.
This was on legitimate coin and token collectibles.
No way, really?
And
like
old banknotes and trinkets and stuff.
I've actually got 4 or 5 Roman coins at home and a couple of Greek
ones. Oh, really?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So maybe I should have went to that one.
So I took a picture of this and I posted it on Twitter, and I said, I hope some of my crypto friends didn't turn up by accident.
That's
Right?
hilarious.
And I got a few likes on it, whatever. But a bit of a sour individual whose name shall remain unspoken from these lips today replied on top of my tweet suggesting, well, the only reason that they might take that and make a mistake out of whether or not to attend is if they wanted to invest in an asset that they'd lose all their money. I'm like, dude,
oh my God, relax, will you please?
Just don't be so angry. And I heard this individual refer to blockchain as a big Excel spreadsheet in the sky last week at something else. So I think there's an element of education still here that's necessary for the market with what you guys are doing with setting some standards around this. Just kind of puts this wrapper on it that says this is how you make it safe.
Exactly. So we have a kind of a dual approach with our technology, in that where rules exist in certain countries, like in Gibraltar or in the Isle of Man or Switzerland, we have incorporated them into our solution. We've hired a fantastic head of risk and compliance in March, and she has transposed a lot of that into actual controls and checks. But again, where they don't exist, we've had to use those sort of best practices that I mentioned from the ICO Governance Foundation, and Deloitte have one called Better Tokens, and so you can see it starting to mature. And like no more than yourself, obviously being in the business 20 plus years, I've seen all this before with hedge funds and with securitization and ETFs, where it's initially a bit of a boom and a very much exotic asset class. Eventually that all gets cleared out, the regulators come in, and it becomes a normal part of the financial services arsenal of investments.
Oh yeah, it's like that show Lost. You ever watch that?
Not in recent years now.
No, it's a while back. At one point, the big, the mysterious man behind the curtain, controlling everything, said, this has happened before, it will happen again.
Exactly. So it's funny, in the US, we would meet some guys who put 10 grand into Bitcoin 5 years ago, and now they're never working again, and they're so anti-regulation and compliance. But I'm like, guys, you might put your money into this, but would you until you can tell your mom and pop to basically that this is a safe investment, well then it's not going to grow. And they complain so much about volatility in the pricing, but it's because there's not enough money in the market. There's not liquidity. There's not the big players, because they can't stand up in front of their investment advisory committee. And the guys who do the due diligence, like I used to in Aberdeen and RBS, they're writing reports for the board, and their career path is going to be pretty short unless they can recommend investments that have the proper controls around this.
Absolutely, and I'm very much motivated to help get all this right now.
Yeah.
Because of the future that I see for digital assets, like we were talking about at the beginning.
Completely.
Where you have equities, bonds, options, futures, whatever, issued digitally, almost as a digital bearer bond, right? And you've got to get that right.
Completely.
So let's do what we can to get it right now as a almost starting to become an institutionalized asset class to an extent on the outer fringes of investment management. And just help them to do that. And I think you guys are perfectly aligned to get that set up.
Well, thank you very much. We're actually working on a new project with one of the really leading asset managers in Europe, and that's around a blockchain implemented funds distribution platform. And from our perspective, there could be 15 or 20 leading service providers in the different areas, but they're going to issue the tokens based on Ethereum, and they've no kind of governance model in play, no technology to govern all of that. So then that's what potentially we would provide. And that's the way I think things will be going in the future. We also spoke to the Australian regulator last year about a project that the guy who runs our office over there is thinking about, and that is basically to to launch a small fund and get rid of all the service providers and just do it all on the blockchain with a smart contract. So in other words,
what country is this happening in?
This is in Australia.
Okay.
So the regulators over there are very pro technology and anything that makes the distance shorter, right? So technology does that, and very, very like the ASX, the Australian Stock Exchange, obviously
very familiar with what's going on
over there, which is really exciting. So the idea was, and I don't think the technology is just there yet, but certainly over the next couple of years, well, if you're giving me money as an investor and there's a smart contract to process that, and then you have a portfolio allocation, and then you have a valuation piece, and then you have a redemption when you want to get your money back. Well, if all of that can be coded into a smart contract and the regulators can access that to make themselves happy, well, then do you need, and if you can solve the whole area around custody, but then do you need auditors? The lawyers
it's already
probably
happening
go away.
in Guernsey with Northern Trust. Right? They're doing this.
As part of the private equity piece, is that
right?
right?
Yeah. So they did a test last week. Wait, I was told this in confidence, so I can't share any of the details. But no, I mean, what is public is the fact that Northern Trust have this private equity blockchain set up in Guernsey.
Brilliant.
Guernsey Financial Services Commission have a node. The auditors, PwC and KPMG, have a node, and they can see these things happening.
Which is a brilliant idea.
So you have that total transparency.
And especially for private equity, because it's such an illiquid area, and VC, and venture capital or real estate would be the other one that we're talking in Australia about doing a project there, because Westfield own half the shopping centres in the world. But that sort of thing, to tokenize that for retail investors, and then you're into the avalanche of regulation to protect normal consumers, which the institutional fund managers can handle, but some of the more exotic guys, it's a new area.
Let's take a breath because we're finishing each other's sentences again.
I know, sorry.
No. This is exactly what I thought would happen if we brought you on the podcast, Shane.
Good man.
I'm interested to know the moment you realized you had something, right?
Yes.
And there have been a couple of different, as we've talked about, incantations of Gecko.
Yes.
But when you realized that you had something where you weren't going to have to keep 6 months worth of family expenses in the current account.
6 months, God, that would be
or maybe 3.
It was 3 at the very beginning, and that was a luxury.
When did you realize that this is it, this is happening, there's no going back?
Right. Oh, right. So just not long before we had that blockchain launch, actually, I got a quote from our first big client who we had the usual, 3 months discussions, which was actually a pretty short procurement cycle, and then we'd had a couple of months of a pilot. And at the end of it, we said, listen, are you guys happy? We kind of asked tongue in cheek if there was a quote that we might be able to use for kind of future, marketing initiatives. And they said, look, this has saved us 40% in terms of our budget and operational efficiency as soon as we came onto the platform.
Yeah.
And we worked it out at about $2 million at a time. And that was when I was like, right, this is something that we can, if this is for a mid-tier player, God, this is something we can really make work. And so that was a key one. But I think there's probably a couple of incremental pieces. Winning the seed corn competition in November 2016, as quite frankly, the money was probably running out, and we'd had 2 big projects cancelled over Brexit that we thought were going ahead because the guys were like, how can we buy our software? We don't know what the rules are going to be, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
But then getting that, and within like a week having some of the leading VC companies like Excel Partners, who funded Spotify, they were on the phone to us immediately, which was brilliant. And that's when I knew, right, okay, we can really do something here. And of course, there's always incremental, like walking the plank every 6 months. You have to kind of learn to be, not so much now, but the first few years, you have to kind of learn to be borderline bankrupt pretty regularly, or just days away from it, and to manage that successfully. But that was a key one, I think, having a proper reference from a happy, well known in our industry client that we could really then build on in the future. That was
absolutely, and the VCs love that stuff too.
Completely, because then they could. We used to, what we did actually, we would sometimes get them to come to actually pitches or come onto a call silently, and here's the illustration of us doing our thing or whatever, and then you can see from there. But a big one for us on the VC side, and we made a policy of it, was that internally we never went out looking for money. I read a very interesting VC piece from the Irish Venture Capital Association, and it said, fundraising is just like dating. If you come across as desperate, nobody wants to see you. And we were a couple of times, this is going back in 2016, we were kind of getting close to the line, but we purposely didn't, go out actively looking for money. So when they come to you, it's you're in a stronger position.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything when you think back, anything you wish you did differently?
Oh my God, how long is that? Oh my God, let me see. Right, so I wish I had went into funds compliance initially, so that would have saved a year.
Yeah.
I wish I had have.
But you would have been too early for DLT and blockchain.
That's
right?
very true. Exactly. So that was good timing. Absolutely. I think as well as that, quite frankly, the initial very core team we had, we were. I right from the beginning, I wanted a global business. I didn't want to spend the next remaining years of my youth trying to incrementally get client after client. I wanted a global lean model that we could then scale on if we got funding. And I probably should have articulated that better to the initial core team, because we've replaced some of our tech team over the last year or so, and that's been great. And our new hires are all focused kind of globally. Mm-hmm. So maybe documenting and also kind of articulating at an early stage that we want to build this into $100 million, billion dollar valuation business globally with offices in a dozen countries, and that's the way it's going to be. And we would expect that the core team are going to be living on a plane and doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a big ask of both of lifestyle and of your resources. So
that's interesting, because how can you say that to a handful of folks up front when you've got basically a program management kit?
Well, completely.
Right?
It's difficult, and especially as we moved into the blockchain piece, because even at that point we weren't externally funded. It meant you're trying to get really good tech people involved who will basically sacrifice what multi 6-figure salary to come on as part of an equity owner in a company that may or may not work, right?
Yeah.
So that there's a lot around kind of motivation and counseling and trying to get people excited. And of course the procurement cycles, which is probably the biggest pain point for us and most fintech companies of the large institutions, is having a baby. It's 9 months, from conception to delivery if you're lucky. So you have to manage that very tightly in terms of funding.
That came up in a fintech roundtable that I did for Enterprise Ireland last month in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And where not in the first session where we talked with 6 asset managers, some of the big names as you mentioned, and 6 of the Irish fintechs were all over there together. In an afternoon session that we had with Scottish fintech alongside the Irish fintech firms, that's where it really came up, was a procurement cycle.
Definitely.
What is it that we can do in representing the fintech community here in Ireland to make that easier for folks, right? And the only thing we could come up with was, again, self-policing standards, governance.
Sure.
Almost a statement of, here are all of my controls, my procedures, all of that up front.
Yeah.
Now that's SOC 2. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
ISO 27001 or something to that effect, right? You can do that and take it forward that way, but
it's not an easy process.
No, it's a good bit of work.
It is. You're still trying to manage especially at the leading kind of brand names, if you like, the big boys. You've got the internal sponsor who wants you in there yesterday. You've got the procurement team who simultaneously are trying to obviously renegotiate your commercial contract, and then you have the tech guys who are worried they're going to be replaced. So trying to manage those 3 relationships, often when they could be in different countries and don't even know or even like each other, can I've learned a lot about kind of massaging and counselling and getting everybody aligned. So that has been a challenge. Whereas it took us 2 months to get our first 4 crypto clients, and it took us 2 years to get our first 4 fund clients. On the crypto side, probably the biggest one we signed up in September, they were able to make a decision in like 48 hours. And it wasn't like $1 million deal, but it was still, substantial.
Well, if it's a big crypto player, then absolutely.
Completely, and the great company and everything. But again, talk to them on a Wednesday, we're working with them on a Monday, kind of thing. And again, you don't have to sit down and explain what is a blockchain. We've had that so many times, as I'm sure you can imagine. That's why we have a completely off-chain version of our product, because otherwise it would be bankrupt if we didn't. quite frankly,
Good luck explaining that. So who do you lean on?
Oh, you mean personally, professionally?
Personally, professionally.
Oh, God, yeah. So, I have to say that in this year in particular, as the core team that we have now have gotten really more and more experienced, I've been leaning on them a lot more. So we've a new head of technology who is fantastic and understands the new world of crypto and tokenization much better than I ever will. Michelle, our head of risk and compliance, is spent 10 years setting up and managing fund governance for like one of the major banks here. So she has been fantastic about keeping me up to date on all the compliance piece for the funds world. And then on the kind kind of on the business development side, it's really been the guys at the three kind of locations. So I haven't managed to move away from the day-to-day stuff fully yet, but I also have a new head of operations starting in January that I'm super excited about.
Good.
And the idea is going into probably next summer, realistically, we'll start handing over stuff to her. And then hopefully I can, check in from my yacht in the south of Spain.
Yeah, good luck.
Well, it probably won't be. It'll probably be from New York to Dock or somewhere.
What do they say? Where are the investors' yachts?
Yeah, exactly. That's true. So, but on the personal side, of course, God, my wife is incredible, and that's my kind of strategic, partner, and bounce everything off her,
Yeah.
and which is great because you're living stuff day to day with your head of the coal face, so you want to get a bit of perspective every once in a while, and even just to have a sounding board to let you know when you're being an idiot.
What's been the biggest, most important achievement over the last 4 years? If you could think to one thing, and I know we talked about the moment you realized you had something and being that conversation with a big asset manager client, or the quote that you got from them.
Yeah.
But in terms of something that you're going to look back on, and now, you're only 4 years in.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it were 10 years from now, what would be this point during those 4 years that you would say that was important?
Yeah, raising the money from Cosmo. Okay. So raising $1 million from a Boston-based...
Shout out to Connor Cantwell and Kieran Hines.
Absolutely, legends. And that was...
Connor's my neighbor.
No way, really?
Yeah. He lives close enough to me. Yeah.
God,
I won't give it away on air.
It's great. Ireland is so small.
I know.
But certainly getting professional investment backing from a US VC company is something that I will always,
And one that's launching a tokenized fund.
Completely. So we've been all over that. That's a fantastic. It's well worth checking that out. Cosmo X, and it's a really innovative offering in the market. And I think that's the way a lot of things are going to go in the future. So that was a major building block, or should I say, roof on the house, because that meant I could plan annually rather than just quarterly or even monthly.
Yeah, I know.
Keep the plate spinning.
It's a lot easier to move when you could see further than 3 months.
Well, exactly. I mean, at some stage, 3 months is a luxury, But I always tell guys who are setting up, regardless of the industry, it's changing in January, but the quarterly revenue cycle, right? So when you've got a team and you're paying a dozen people or whatever, every quarter you have to submit all that tax stuff, right? And that it can be quite. So you've got 2 months, and then every third month you're swallowing a laptop.
Yeah.
So that's changing in January. Thankfully, it's going to be every month. But that was one of the main things. And I always advise founders, guys, if you're not the person who's going to stay awake at night worrying about money, even in your personal life, you need to find somebody who will. Because otherwise, it's just not going to work.
No, you just need to know. Yeah. You need to know how much is left all the time. What's one thing people wouldn't expect to know about you?
Oh, let me see. I was thinking about that one coming down, actually, and I looked at my phone, and my friend asked me, are you all set for the Slayer concert in 2 weeks? So I'm a massive, thrash and death metal fan, and so Slayer on tracks.
I didn't know they were still alive.
They're barely alive. Actually, God help, one of the poor guys passed away, but this is their last tour. I think they're kind of hitting 60, so if they headbang anymore, their heads are going to fall off.
Oh, I know.
But, so I played the drums my whole life. I was playing all afternoon yesterday, and a lot of that really kind of aggressive. And you can hear the speed I talk, right? Yeah, so that kind of really fast stuff.
It slows you down a bit.
Exactly. So so massive metal fan, and have been since I could listen. So that'll never go away.
All right. Well, Owen, who is obviously my co-host for this podcast, who's not here today unexpectedly, he's a big rap fan.
No way.
And I was just listening to the song over the weekend that was my favorite, an initial first melding of metal and rap, which was Public Enemy.
No way. Brilliant. Anthrax and Public Enemy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant.
So, we leave it to Owen to name each episode. Maybe he'll come up with something unique for this.
All right. That sounds great.
Thanks for coming on, Shane. It was awesome to have you.
Great to be here. Awesome. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Shane.
Money never sleeps, pal.
We'd like to thank Shane for opening up his mind for the 24th episode of Money Never Sleeps, a podcast brought to you by Norio Ventures and Owen Fitzgerald, and sponsored by Top Tier Recruitment. You can find out more about Gecko Governance on geckogovernance.com. That's GECKO governance.com. And by following Shane himself on Twitter. He's at ShaneBrettGP. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe to Money Never Sleeps on transistor.fm, iTunes, Spotify, or on your favorite online media channel, and leave us a review. Each one helps. You can now access all of the Money Never Sleeps episodes through a link on the podcast page on the Norio Ventures website, which is norioventures.com. If you're an entrepreneur with a story to tell, anywhere in the world, drop us a line using the contact form on the Norio Ventures website. We'd like to thank Conan Brophy from Create Sound for recording and editing this podcast. Thanks to Bank of Ireland Start Lab, with one more shout out to Carolyn Quinlan for hosting us and for all that they do for the startup community in Ireland. Finally, congratulations to the Boston Red Sox on winning it all this year. I love that team. Till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!